Hi everyone. So yes, my talk is really an exploration of Beyonce and her love of microorganism. It starts off with asking the question, who runs the world? And it takes inspiration from a song on Beyonce's fourth album, the fourth studio album, Four. Fourth solo studio album, Four. And you should all be prepared because this is going to be quite a journey. So a little bit about me. This is really just for the later Q&A because this is really the only bit that I know about. I know about myself, and therefore it's going to be easier for you to ask me questions about this than anything else I tell you. So my name is Michael Sulu. I'm a biochemical engineer or a process engineer. I work at UCL. You can find me at Michael Sulu on Twitter, but I generally just rant about equality and equity. And when I signed up to do this, I was told that it can be funny, but it needs to be specific and really focus in on a niche to appeal to the audience. And this will probably do neither thing, be neither funny nor specific, but you will see. You might learn some stuff. It's very unlikely, but you might learn some stuff. So a little bit about Beyonce. Everybody loves her. And we need to really start off by addressing the elephant in the room. I am definitely not attacking her. I think that we all know that if there was ever kind of a galactic republic, the leader would be her. It could, of course, be Michelle Obama, but it would probably be her. And after what I've heard today, some people are saying that maybe Dolly Parton's got a shout, but I'm currently still rooting for Beyonce. And instead of attacking her, what I'm actually doing is proposing a multitude of references to important subjects, like a female empowerment within her songs are actually not those references. They're ode to the power of the microscopic. She was obviously in the band Destiny's Child. She's sometimes called Queen Bee, the first hint that potentially bacteria are things that she likes. A lot of people think that the B stands for other things, but I think we all know what it truly stands for. And that is the beginning of her dropping nuggets relating to a love of microorganisms for a very, very long time. So why? Why would she be doing this? And there's a really, really simple answer. And it's because she knows, I think as we all do, that we live in a patriarchal world. And the patriarchal world isn't really ready to relinquish the power to microorganisms, but it is potentially more willing to listen to the more palatable option of listening to songs about female empowerment, or that portray to be about female empowerment, when we all deep down know exactly what they're about. So we're going to start back at the beginning. We're going to go back to where it all started. It was the summer of 1998. I was just a student. I developed a love for the song No, 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 Part 2, featuring Wyclef Jean, as the image shows. And it elevated from a chart hit by the addition of Wyclef Jean to a certified nightclub banger. So I thought I would listen to the album. Now, does this song have any hidden microorganism information in it? No, of course it doesn't. But that's because Beyonce didn't write it. So the first breakdown, the first track, track 7 on Destiny's Child's first album, the eponymously titled Destiny's Child, is one called With Me. And the world believes that this is a response to Usher's You Make Me Wanna. And this kind of shows that both of these artists are potentially way ahead of their time. If you ask yourself that they are, or tell yourself they aren't talking about people or the power that people have in relationships on each other, what they are actually talking about is the relationship that we as a species have with microorganisms. And they were, I guess, realizing a long time before most people that we are coexisting in a complex symbiotic relationship with us. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into that kind of complex symbiotic relationship later. Second album from Destiny's Child, The Writing is on the Wall. Track 5, Bugaboo. It's an ode to pathogenic enteric bacteria. And you can see from the lyric that I put on the slide that obviously he's talking about bacteria. And some of you may be starting to doubt me, and you might think this is a little bit tenuous. But if you listen to some of the other lyrics in this song, which goes, and it's not hot that you be leaving me messages every 10 minutes and then you stop by. When I first met you, you were cool, but it was game, you had me fooled. Because 20 minutes after I gave you my number, you already had my mailbox full. So what this seems to be is about giving your phone number to a man and then bugging you. But when you look at it with a slightly different lens and realize it's a song about pathogenic enteric bacteria, what we're clearly talking about here is the effect of ingesting something unpleasant and ending up with diarrhea. It's clear that 20 minutes after the start, that's when the bad stuff would happen. And probably every 10 minutes from then on, you would really be wishing it hadn't happened. So we go on to the next album, Survivor. This album obviously takes a bit of a break from the tribute because she's had a really, really unfortunate occurrence with bacteria. But I think we can safely say that this album is clearly a message to bacteria or microorganisms. She's had a torrid time. It's really kind of eye of the needle stuff, basically, but she survived. She is a survivor. And she clearly loses her love for our microscopic friends for a little while. There was a Christmas album that came after this called The 8 Days of Christmas, but she was obviously still sore or upset. And then we're now like 6 years on from the start. It's 2004 and nothing is okay in the world. The next and last album is called Destiny Fulfilled. But no one really knows why she's not over it, because she still isn't over it in this album, because there are no references to the microscopic world in this album either. But we suspect it's Michelle. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we know it's Michelle, AKA the other one? But the reason we know it's Michelle is because if we look at the next piece of evidence, we can see that Kelly has definitely already developed a love for microorganisms. So we're going back a little bit in time. She has obviously got over it quicker than Beyonce, but it happened to Beyonce, it didn't happen to her. It's late 2002, early 2003, and Kelly brought out Kelly brought out an album called Simply Deep. And the standout song on the album was Dilemma, which was with Nelly and Kelly. For those of you that don't know, of which I assume there are none in the audience, it starts off with the line, "Baby, I love you, baby, I need you." This is obviously referring back to the complex symbiotic relationship we have with microorganisms that coexist in the world around us. Moving on, on the same album, so we're still talking about Kelly now. On the same album, she had a song called Can't Nobody. And this song, Can't Nobody, samples the track Let's Get Small. Obviously yet another nod to microscopic life. Now, I can't say how up to date she was with research at the time, but it clearly speaks to the complex relationship that we have with therapeutic protein production, resonating the fact that there are some things that we as people can't cure, and we have to rely on the smallest of us to fix. Based on the timing, I would say that this song is probably about the blossoming production of humanized monoclonal antibodies that are used as therapeutics, and which enabled the treatment of diseases that our immune system can't yet cope with. It makes perfect sense. Moving on, back to Beyonce. We're moving on now, and we're just focusing on her solo albums. Dangerously in Love was released before Destiny Fulfilled, so she's still reeling from what we now will call the incident. We will never know if it was one of many incidents or just a one-off incident, but we do know is it took a long time to recover from it. But thankfully, she did recover from it. So now it's 2006. She's got the album Birthday. Things are beginning to correct themselves, and there's a track called track 3 on the album called Sugar Mama. So this one is so clear that there can be no denying it. Everyone assumes that this B means birthday, but you think about it and don't follow the crowd, this is clearly Bacteria Day. Then there's track 3, which is described as being a story of a successful woman using money to keep her man at home. Now, we all know that Queen Bee would not be so heteronormative, and what the song is really about is the first foray for Beyonce into the link between the mind and the gut. She recognizes that sometimes when you crave sugar, your body doesn't need the sugar, your gut does. And more importantly, the microorganisms within the gut do. So she's feeding the sugar to keep them there. It's also, and this one is tenuous, I must admit, not obviously like all the other links I've made so far. It hints at the ubiquitousness of sugar in all living things. It's consumed by bacteria. It makes up the surface of bacteria, leaving us to asking the question, who is the sugar mama? Moving on. I am Sasha Fierce. Track 1 of disc 1 is called If I Were a Boy. That's 2008. And this is catharsis. Beyonce has truly started to synthesize new knowledge. And she's putting things together that most of us couldn't comprehend. She truly is the queen. That new knowledge empowers her and enables her to create the alter ego Sasha Fierce. She uses the first track as an obvious form of reflection on her relationship with microorganisms. So the mainstream media thought this was a song about swapping gender roles and playing both sides, kind of like the good guy versus bad guy type story in a relationship. But it's really, in reality, Beyonce is talking about her relationship, not with a man, but with microorganisms, basically reflecting on the incident and how it made her feel, but also acknowledging that the inherent good that bacteria or microorganisms can do. So we're back on track. And don't worry, we're getting towards the end now. So this is the album. The album that the title of the talk is taken from. And this is the last album I'm going to discuss for a variety of reasons. The most important one being that when this album came out, I just bought a smartphone. So I think it's like 2010, 2011, which meant that I got Spotify and didn't listen to whole albums anymore. So I actually don't know whether or not she carried on with it. But it also seemed like a good place to stop. But you wonderful audience, I invite you to keep looking and tell me what you find. Track 1 of the album 4 is 1 + 1 = 2. Now we start to get deep. The first track from Beyonce's 4th studio album is called 1 + 1 = 2. And once again, this is thought to be a relationship song. And in a way it is. Here we are talking to the one to be the collective microorganisms within you or your microbiome. And recognizing that there is more of them within us than cells that make up our entire bodies. But it goes further. 1 + 1 = 2 also hints at the fact that through division, they multiply, which links to divide and conquer. It also links to Monod and his theory. So this focuses on the rate of division and how it's impacted by a substrate, linking back to the track on her second album, Sugar Mama, as sugar is often the substrate that is used. So you think we could have control of them because we can remove sugar and they die, but we can't because we also need sugar to survive. And some of them have the capacity to self-cannibalize or sporulate and survive. Then for those of you who know about Monod, you will know that this can be an empirically derived and oversimplification. And the mathematicians will recognize this just gives you an expression with a natural upper limit. But is it true? You can look at things like jam and know that sugar can also kill bacteria, or at least inhibit growth. And it does this by exerting osmotic pressure on the cell, so we can use the sugar to gain the upper hand. Again, no, we can't, because that amount of sugar would also kill us. We live in perpetual symbiosis. The power it exerts over us goes further than cravings. There are chemicals that can be released that affect our mood, how and therefore what we think, and it does this through the gut-brain axis, which links to the central nervous system to the enteric nervous system. Now, the communication between the gut and the brain goes both ways, but only really one way directly affects the way you think and move, and that is from the gut to the brain. And it's controlled by the enteric nervous system, which is controlled by enteric bacteria. So we are forever 1 + 1 = 2. So we move on to track 12 of our fourth studio album. And we all know that this is said to be a huge female empowerment song. And I'm here for that, I really am. But it's also so much more than that. It questions that through all that we've learned so far about the music of Beyonce, we know the fact that we live in symbiosis with these microorganisms inside us and around us. We know that they evolve quicker than we do. They can share genetic information, but we also know that they have the ability to control the way we feel, to the link between the gut and the brain. So the question it asks is, who is in charge? In conclusion, Beyonce is larger than life, but both understands the importance of and loves the microscopic world. It is all really a heads up to the conspiracy theorists, oddball QAnon types. who think there's a super elite who are lizard people or converse with aliens to control the world, you're looking in the wrong place. The real power could or would come from an ability to talk to, or even better, to control microorganisms. You'd have the power to silently infect huge portions of the population. When you think back to the link between the gut microbiome and your brain, you actually have the power to control anyone and everyone. So I ask you one final time, who runs the world?
Thank you. I mean, I think, like, from my perspective, at least 20% of that applause was for just taking yourself completely out onto a limb and then just dancing there. Like, yeah, okay, I've made this talk about something. I'm going to work with it. So yeah, congratulations for that. So I'll give Evie a chance to go through the chat and pick out some questions, but I have a couple first. So the reason that I haven't seen Beyonce talk about this in any interviews, is that just because the way that science is so undervalued in our society that, like, her words are taken and not communicated to us, for example, in Q magazine, or is there a deeper reason that I haven't seen her talking about this publicly?
There'll be many reasons. There's that fear of the backlash from the patriarchal society. That same society will not value the words she utters because she's a woman, and specifically a woman of color. But also these kind of, I guess, not palatable to the mainstream kind of conversations will always be edited out in interviews.
Yeah, no, that's so second question. Like, you have a flourishing academic career. How have you managed to balance constructing crazy and elaborate, possibly some might argue incoherent and wildly unvalidated conspiracy theories while doing biology?
I feel like you stick to what you're good at, don't you? If there's a story to be told, I will try and tell it. We shouldn't let like spurious things like facts and science get in the way of telling a good story.
Okay, or promoting good music. Yeah, now I can understand that. An actual question. I think there were a couple of scientific points that you were making in your talk. Was one of them that the way that sugar manifests in your gut sends signals to your brain and prompts responses that at a conscious level you might not be aware of? Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah. So when you feel the need to consume sugar, there's usually more than one reason. Mm-hmm. It can be it can be psychological. It could be that your body actually needs sugar to survive, but often it's your gut telling you that you need to provide it with sugar to keep your gut microbiome alive. It does that through a feedback mechanism with your brain, which is why you get the, I guess, like pleasure from certain foods, because it has to reward you, so it becomes self-fulfilling.
And is it sugar one of the strongest ones that does that? I mean, do you get it with things like salt, or like, are there other top ones up there along with sugar, or is it just sugar?
Sugar's the worst one. Sugar is one of the most addictive foodstuffs that you can eat. It's genuinely terrible for you. And I say that as a big consumer of sugar, but it can become the thing that, like, it can control your life as well as the way you think. If one piece of advice for anyone is to give up all refined sugar, and you will feel much better.
I mean, you say that. Evie.
We do have some interesting questions. The one is follow up on what you just said. Are you basically saying it is acceptable to raid the biscuit tin because we have no control over it anyway? Exactly.
I mean, if you know who the boss of you is, if it's you, then don't eat the biscuits. But if it's truly your microbiome, which it almost always is, then you have no control over it. Eat away.
Nothing we can do. What sparked your eureka moment when you actually realized the connection between Beyonce and microorganisms?
I think like I feel like you both know that the answer to that question, which was you asked me for a title for a talk and I gave you one, and then I had to make a talk out of it. But
backstage chat.
Yes, I've always known it. I realized it immediately. We're kindred spirits. Our love for microorganisms grew at the same time, so I could see it from the beginning.
Follow up on the sugars question. Does this include alcohol? We are in the middle of a pandemic, so people are worried about that.
So, well, I mean, alcohol generally that you drink, unless you're like me, who only drinks vodka. No, I don't. Will have a lot of sugar in it. So it does include alcohol. Your craving for alcohol itself isn't related to your gut, though. And if you generally have a definite craving for alcohol, then you might have different issues.
Another question is, do you think that Beyonce married Jay-Z when she did that, she brought him in onto this love for microorganisms? Have you spotted any signs of this in his recent work?
So this actually speaks back to what Robin was saying earlier, in that hip hop and rap music is actually in some ways way more complex to find patterns in, but can also be a lot more simple in some ways. So I have been looking through Jay-Z. I think we can all be relatively sure that there is a super elite of people who understand how this is going, what is happening, and learning how to control our guts so as to control our brains and take over the world. So Jay-Z definitely knows. Whether or not he's dropping breadcrumbs in his music, I do not know.
There's a slightly confusing one. Have there been studies disproving our ability to live in jam?
No, but I don't know if you need to study your whether or not you can live in jam. By virtue of being in jam, you would probably struggle to breathe. Jam and I guess jam and honey are very similar, but the honey has more antimicrobial properties than just its sheer sugar content. If you could coat yourself with jam internally, it would probably kill you because of the osmotic pressure that you exert on your body's cells, which would draw the water out of your body's cells, dehydrating you internally. And that would be pretty bad.
This suddenly got really dark. Another question is, are Outkast in on the act? Lyrics such as, lend me some sugar, I'm your neighbor. Certain flags.
I hadn't thought about it, but hey Ma, I mean, it definitely sounds like it might be.
Is this a start of a wonderful, wonderful conspiracy theory taking over the internet in the next few weeks?
I'd like to hope so.
Talking about addiction cravings, can you tell us about cheese? What
about cheese?
I'm assuming someone is looking for an excuse to eat a lot of cheese. So I would guess that they want to hear that it's the microorganisms telling them to eat the cheese rather than
I mean, it definitely could be. Cheese obviously has a lower level of lactose than milk, but there is still lactose present, which means that and all different, like your gut microbiome is like a medley of different bacteria which will have different preferences. So it definitely could be. It doesn't sound massively unlikely. You'd probably want to go more for something that is creamier, maybe like ice cream. But if cheese is your thing, just give in.
Right. I think the question was, they don't need to give up, right?
They don't need to give up.
Last question is, do you agree that when Maroon 5 released the song Sugar, this was purely coincidental and they don't get it at all?
Maroon 5 are definitely not part of the super elite. Jay-Z, I can believe. Outkast, maybe through association. Maroon 5, I don't think so.
Well, thank you very much. That's it for the questions.
Thank you. I mean, I'm gonna put that up there with one of the least evidence-based presentations we have ever had at Nerd Nite. So a new record. Thanks, Mike.